And I left the internship convinced that I was going to be the youngest general manager in the Ritz-Carlton portfolio after graduation.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Smack Hospitality Podcast. This episode features Joshua Gan, Regional Director, Asia Pacific of the EHL Group. And Josh told us all about his journey from starting to work for EHL in Lausanne during his days as a student to becoming the first ever representative of the group to be based in Asia and now being Regional Director. He also shared some insights with us about the brand new EHL campus in Singapore and what to expect from the expansion. Enjoy the show. Josh, my friend, I have no words for this episode simply because, first of all, we haven't spoken in a long time, so this will be a catch up of one another, and second of all, because it's great to reconnect. Before we start, I hope it's okay if I congratulate you on your recent achievement of becoming a dad. Because I feel like that should be mentioned, and I'm sure, knowing you back from EHL, you'll be a wonderful dad. So let me get that right out of the way. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. The reason I asked you to come join us for an episode here on Smack, Josh, is because I find it fascinating. We've known each other, so I tried to figure this out. We've known each other for a little over 10 years. Yes. If my calculation is correct, and I find it fascinating because I still remember the times when we worked together in the admissions office at EHL as student assistants, and looking at how your path has progressed or gone, and obviously following your LinkedIn and social media activities of how things have progressed for EHL and APAC as well. So my first question is going to be very, very straightforward. How's it been? It must feel like a crazy ride from, BSc 1 which was like the second year for those that are not familiar with the EHL course at the time, where you started working in the admissions department, probably didn't think much of it, and now you're in charge of an entire region for the EHL Group. Walk me through that process, and if you hear that, how crazy does it sound?
It's extremely crazy because to think that we just started, it was a part-time job, right? Being a student assistant in the admissions office at the EHL. And what were we doing? We were packing brochures. We were packing boxes of brochures to be sent to education fairs in different parts of the world. We were guiding students and potential students around campus with campus tours. We're doing all these different activities on campus, but no, you would never think that this would lead to a job. And if I would count the time as a student assistant as part of my time working for EHL, it's about 10 years now. Without that, it will be this is my 8th year working for the organization as a staff. So it's been quite a ride, and this is my fourth or fifth role perhaps with the organization. I'm not even sure anymore. So if I would sort of draw that line, so starting as a student assistant, so supporting the Asia Pacific region, I think a lot of time is about time and chance, right? You don't really determine sometimes luck. And I would say this really happened for this, and I think I would have to thank you for starting me on this crazy journey in the world.
I was going to say I am going to take part of the reward here, because
you should.
I remember I don't even exactly remember how it went, but I think the bottom line was the AO at the time, who was in charge of Asia Pacific, he was looking for a student assistant, and I was working with a lady who did parts of Europe and the US. Exactly. And then you came along, and or the situation or the position came along, and I said, well, the best representative of that continent is in my class, so I might as well ask him. And then I think you got on board quite quickly after that, right?
Yes, it was February 2011, if I remember correctly, and that's when I started. And I think back then when we started, it was a very different office from today as well. 10 years on. So back then, we had a few people who were recruiting, traveling the world to search for potential students to introduce EHL to. And then I was supporting the gentleman who was at that time, I think, responsible for Asia Pacific, but also the United Kingdom and Ireland and all that. So that part of the world. So he left the organization shortly after. I think in first week of March or something like that, 2011. And so for the periods of March to summer, I was sort of alone and helping to sort of fill in the gap where sort of helping to send replacement staff into Asia for selection days or recruitment sessions and all that. And then in the summer of 2011, I remember I was actually in Malaysia for a camp with my church, and then this lady called me from Switzerland. This number from Switzerland called and said, "Hey, I'm Naomi, Naomi Cassidy. And I'm actually the new admissions officer for Asia Pacific and the UK.
Right.
And so I'm actually going to be working with you. You are going to be working with me." So that was my first contact with the next my next boss. So then I worked with Naomi for the remainder of my time at EHL. I think what was great also, as I mentioned, time and chance, was that EHL was at that point in time also expanding. So I think 2010 saw the arrival of a new general director of EHL, Michel Rocha, and he really brought a wave of growth. So if I talk about back then, we had 2,000 students overall. Today, we have about 3,700 students within about a period of 10 years. So Michel Rocha has been responsible for driving this growth and this strategy. So a big part of the growth strategy was, of course, the focus on Asia Pacific. So therefore, I think back then the team couldn't grow with full-time staff. So what happened? The progression of packing brochures and bringing students around campus actually got allowed the chance to travel the world as well for the school, to promote the school in Asia while I was still a student. So I think it was in March and April of 2012 when I went to Shanghai and Singapore with Naomi to organize selection days. And then in April, I went by myself, actually, granted permission by the director of admissions back then, to go to Japan and Korea. So organizing my own trips. So that was really the start of sort of solo trips, and also working with other students to promote Asia in the region.
Yeah.
And then I did my second internship in 2012, end of 2012 at Ritz-Carlton in Singapore. And I left the internship convinced that I was going to be the youngest general manager in the Ritz-Carlton portfolio after graduation. I was going to join the company. I love
That's
operations.
A great story. Yeah.
I was going to do that.
Yeah.
And then the offer from the school came along to say,
Yeah.
So what happened was that, well, I go on.
So I was just wondering. So just to be clear, so you do your second internship, and again, for those that are not familiar with the course, the second internship is sort of like a year before you graduate, right? So you come back to Lausanne, we graduate. Walk me through that decision process, because I imagine, knowing you and knowing that once something is in your head, you usually tend to go forward with it and just do it. How difficult was it for EHL to convince you of the opportunity to, and you will forgive me for saying this, to being a one-man show in Asia? Because I remember very, very vividly when you started, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no base in Asia, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're very right.
So that can't have been an easy process
in Asia. Yeah. How do I put this? I would say that, I mean, I love operations. I love hospitality. That's why I chose to come to EHL, because the general manager dream was very real. And to be honest, even today, once in a while, when I travel and meet inspiring general managers, like Pierre Perrosset of Ritz-Carlton Hong Kong that you interviewed in another episode of a podcast, they make me think back to, well, I really wish I had taken that pathway. But why? So I came back from my second internship for my final year at EHL, like you, and then I think EHL was at a point in time where really growth was very, very apparent. And I think what was happening was that they made the growth strategy very strongly Asia focused. And I had seen other universities or other universities in other countries like US and Australia, for example, that had pursued growth strategies focused on Asia. But to them, Asia was essentially one or two countries, right? And therefore, the diversity on campus really suffered. And I didn't want to be one of those alumni, grouchy old men alumni sitting around one day around a fondue and saying, well, EHL is all, people from this country now today. When I had a chance to do something, right? So when EHL said, hey, would this be interesting? Do you want to join the team? We are growing Asia. I said yes, for that reason I mentioned, but also for the reason that, well, it would really be a chance to discover Asia. I'm Asian, but Asia is so diverse. To really travel and discover Asia and build a network for my own. And the fact that I had an amazing experience at EHL. EHL transformed me as a person, and I wanted to continue sharing that experience. So those were the three sort of reasons. But I told my hiring manager, Lucilla, back then, was the director of admissions, to say, I'm going to do this for 2 years. I'm going to do this for 2 years, and I'm going to leave, because then I go back to my GM track.
Right.
But that didn't happen, obviously.
I was going to say that didn't go so well. Okay, so we're explain to me, Josh, when you accepted this job with Lucilla, were you aware, or let me ask it differently, how aware were you of the challenges that you would be facing? And I'm sure there's been plenty. And I do want to hear one or two dirty secrets of the beginning of your time in Singapore after graduating, because, like I said, essentially there was no one you could ask, right? So there was nobody who had previously done what you had done or what you have done for EHL in Asia. Walk me through those first, I don't know, weeks or months, maybe if you so want, in 2013 when you graduated and started that position in Asia. Were you based in Asia straight away, or did you work from Lausanne for a couple of weeks?
So I was in Lausanne for the first 2 years of the role, being admissions officer, responsible for Asia Pacific. But to take note that I wasn't the only one doing it. So Naomi Cassidy, as I mentioned, my colleague, was handling the region before in the UK. However, coincidentally, about I think May or April of 2013, just before graduation in July, she went on maternity leave. So I took over all her markets back then, including the UK, for about a few months to a year. And then when she came back, I continued taking APAC, and we worked together with APAC for some time, and then I took over APAC eventually, overall. So there was that base to work on, but I think overall EHL has transited from a school where people just applied to, and now we actually have professionalized as a university in how we actually search and prospect for students, and that's something that happened overall, not just for APAC. But nonetheless, I think when we were in school, Fritz, do you remember how many Asians were there in our cohort? Maybe 10, 15, 20?
Yeah, max. Yeah, not a lot. You're right. Yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now each cohort has roughly about 80 to 100 Asians, but that's in a proportion. Of course, there are much more students overall. So we are already looking now at the overall. I think when we were in school, about 5% Asian. When now the overall EHL, we're looking at 17 to 18% Asian in terms of student numbers. So that has grown a lot. So I think if you ask me, well, what really happened when I joined? I mean, it was very basic sales, right? You look at the data you have. I went to a CRM. I just looked at schools where students applied from before, and then there was a lot of legwork. So I was traveling so much. I remember I joined on 1st of August officially, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I went a month in Asia, came back for a week, went another month in Asia, came back for a week again, and went another month in Asia and came back again. So that was my first few months of the job. I was a traveling salesman. I just went everywhere, visiting all that, and that sort of pattern continued for the next few years. It was really just traveling.
Yeah, Josh, how important was that? Because looking at where you are now as regional director, and we will come to that in a second, what that role entitles. But how important is it for you, or was it for you, to understand the groundwork some of your colleagues are doing now, whereas you're in a managerial position now, to be able to understand that manager role that you were about to take a couple of years later, because I imagine having had your boots on the ground in all these different countries, and as you said, Asia is not just China, right? There's a lot more there. There's a lot of diverse countries, and it's not as easy to say, we're conquering China and that's we're conquering Asia. So how important was that that idea of understanding the market before going on to becoming, or having the responsibilities that you have right at this point in time?
I think it's absolutely crucial, but it's not just about understanding the market, it's also understanding the function and the job. I think this is very much aligned to the philosophy of EHL's education, where if you want to be a manager, you need to know how rooms are clean, how toilets are washed, right? I think that's something very, very similar to that approach. What I often tell my colleagues today, as I've now 14 people, including myself, in Asia Pacific. I tell my colleagues who handle smaller markets or more distinct markets, I say, I'm so jealous of you because you can really go deep into a market, whereas back then I had to cover all of APAC, all of Asia Pacific, and I could only touch and go. I could only go into a very superficial level of my understanding of each market. And that's but that was also an advantage because I could link the dots together and look at trends overall for the region. So there was both a strength and a weakness. But what happened was that I was really myself for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then in 2015, that's when actually I moved to Asia, I moved to Singapore, and then I actually had a colleague from also who transferred from Lausanne, Daniel Exertine, and he took over China for me. So then I handed over China to him. And then shortly after, I had another lady who joined me, Nina Seppi, who took over Southeast Asia. And then we hired
Shout out to Nina and Daniel.
I handed over India. Exactly. So I sort of handed over different parts of APAC to different people, and then I continued with some areas. But I think the difficulty of that is when you have markets yourself and when you also manage people, it's hard to have that balance of market ownership and market sort of development yourself and managing people at the same time. So now I don't handle markets, and so it's much easier to have the big picture view on things.
Josh, 2 years into your admission role, you transfer over to Singapore. Walk me through that process. I would imagine I very, very, very vividly remember, even though this was 5 or 6 years ago, the first pictures that you sent through on Facebook of the new office It was, it was not pretty at all. And a couple months later, all of a sudden, there's a fully stacked bar in there, and I'm jealous as hell that I haven't had a drink with you there yet. Walk me through that process and the first couple of steps from admissions officer for APAC based in Lausanne to starting the first ever office of the EHL Group, or the first notable office of EHL Group in Asia.
It's funny because actually we have 120 bottles of gin, so you better visit soon before I finish them myself.
Jesus Christ!
The bar is transferred
I'm
to the
really
campus
jealous now.
So, I mean, actually, this was the first office. This was the first representative office of EHL abroad, anywhere in the world outside of Switzerland. So this was quite a big step for the group to take. And funny enough, history will tell you that EHL took a strategic decision and that happened, and that is true. However, at the same time, it was a step in my personal life. My ex-girlfriend actually back then was in Singapore. So I wanted to be back in Singapore. So I actually wrote a proposal. I wrote several proposals, sent it in, and actually they approved. Say, okay, go to Singapore, start up the office, and you can be based from there, representing EHL in Asia Pacific. And then they gave me the title also regional manager Asia Pacific when I went there. So then I would not just be doing recruitment. My focus would still be student recruitment. I was also meant to represent APAC, the group with communications, marketing, and also industry and alumni relations, moving to Singapore. And moving to Singapore, you said, well, the first, it was we had to find a place. So I actually looked at all the co-working spaces, but back then in 2015, co-working wasn't as developed as it is today. WeWork had not yet entered Singapore. So the options were not as how do I say it, were not aligned to the EHL standards, let's say in branding. So we needed to find something which we could really call home, and therefore we found a real estate agent, and she found us this place, which was actually the address was 1 Club Street, which is perfect for EHL.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Okay. And then, Josh, as a final step in talking about your career before we get into the nitty-gritty EHL details, help me understand your transformation from the first day you walked into that office and what your responsibilities were at the time to where we are today with 14 members of staff that you have in the office in the regional APAC office. You've got a campus under your belt now as well, which obviously we need to dig in very deep, because I've had a couple of requests to ask everything we need to know about that campus. So just walk me through before we start talking about all that. Walk me through those last 5-6 years from moving to Singapore to the responsibility you have today and how that's come across.
Definitely. I think when I look at my own LinkedIn profile, it seems so orderly and everything makes sense, right? The progression. And I think when people talk to me, they expect to that I can tell them, well, this was the plan from the beginning. The thing is, there wasn't a plan from the beginning for me. I told you at the start that I was going to do 2 years with EHL and then leave. But then at the end of 2 years, well, the chance to open an office in Singapore came up. So I said, well, let's open the office, do it for 2 years, and then go back to hospitality. So then I did it for 2 years, grew the brand, hired people, just grew the team as well, because I really knew that if we wanted to build EHL's brand in Asia, we needed more people on the ground to build the network and to just make noise for EHL, right? And to form those relationships, extremely important. So we just focused on building the brand. And I think what we did from the very beginning was to always take a bigger picture approach rather than say, well, I'm only going to do student recruitment. For us, we were always saying, I am building the brand of EHL in Asia Pacific, and we'll do everything we can to build the brand. So that meant talking to alumni, that meant talking to chambers of commerce, the embassies, everything that we could lay our hands on, we did. And that's really the approach we still take today, where we always take the big picture and we say, as long as I'm aligned to the vision of the group of EHL, I'm all right. Even though I've not been given explicit instruction to do something, I know I can do it because it's within the responsibility of representing the group in APAC. So that I think that approach really helped us, because we therefore forged relationships not just externally but internally as well. So we're always on the hunt internally for resources to bring to Asia. One example would be, I saw recently one of our professors posting on LinkedIn saying, hey, I need a company for the strategy challenge in the third year of the EHL bachelor. So then I reached out to her saying, well, we have companies in Asia and therefore let's do it. So it's always about those things that are important, and we have so many resources. We just don't use them all at the same time. That's where I think our role comes in, to bring EHL and what we can bring to bear to Asia Pacific. So that's really part of that journey for us growing in Asia. So that was the first 2 years. And then actually I was going to leave. I was thinking of transiting out in 2017. And then the campus project came online. Right. And that's when I say, okay, I think at this point in time, I really need to make a decision. Do I want to stay in education, or do I want to stay in hospitality? And by that time, to be honest, I really I believe in education. I think you would not find somebody who say I don't believe in education, but I truly believe in the impact of education because I've seen how EHL and its philosophy and its way of teaching changed individuals in Asia. I mean, my students at least from Asia. And I've seen my first batch of students that I recruited start in 2014 and graduate in summer 2018, and seen the transformation of them. And that's where I really made the decision. I'm staying in education. I want to stay with EHL because it's a growing brand. It's a legacy brand that's growing, and there's quite a lot we can do to impact the community, the global community. So that's when I said I'm staying. And then I was brought on board the campus project. So the campus project, if I can just go into it right away, was was something quite, because it wasn't in the books, right? Nobody had said open the office and then we open a campus. It was more, well, let's have a campus because there's an opportunity. Also because I think you remember a couple of years back in 2016, there was a referendum in Switzerland, I think back then, to speak about immigration or limiting immigration. And how that would impact EHL is that I think there was a limitation where students would only be able to spend 1 year at any point in time before leaving the country and re-entering. So of course that would impact the student experience. So I think the idea was that students would go outside of Switzerland for one semester, and we wanted to find a location for that. Of course, the danger of that passed because I think hopefully the Swiss people realized the danger of that to the economy and to I mean, I guess society in general. So that didn't happen, but that caused the group to look outside of its own borders to say, well, let's actually have a campus somewhere else in the world. And so that really opened it up, and we looked at different locations in the world. We did a survey as well internally to students and parents to sort of say, well, if you would have a more international experience with EHL, where would you want to be? And I think the two main locations that came up were Asia Pacific and North America. And we looked, I think the management looked at the forecasts of economic growth and jobs for the future, and Asia Pacific was chosen for that reason. And then we started looking at different locations in Asia. So then we looked at the normal culprits in Asia, right? Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, I guess Tokyo, Seoul, and a few others, Bangkok, for example. And we chose Singapore for the reasons why most companies choose Singapore in Asia. Great. There's the stable government. There's the local language of working. The local medium of language is actually English, easy to work. Bureaucracy is relatively simple, ease of starting a business, and all that. Right, the normal reasons why people choose to stay in Singapore or to start a business in Singapore. So then we made a decision, and then of course the next step was to say, well, let's then open a campus in Singapore. But of course, with an orderly country, you can't just walk into a country like that and say, well, I want to start a university, because education is something very that's held very closely by the powers that be. So then we needed to find a way to actually start EHL in Singapore. So that started the whole discussion with the various government agencies, and being here on the ground in Singapore, I led most of that exploration at the beginning to sort of find the right people to talk to. The turning point came actually in May of 2017, and that's actually where we thankfully actually got the Minister of Education for Singapore back then to visit EHL just before he spoke at the St. Gallen Symposium. So he visited EHL, and he really understood then that what we stood for and why we wanted to come to Singapore and how we could contribute to Singapore's education ecosystem, not just for undergraduate and master programs, but also for lifelong learning. So for executive education, for continuing education for working professionals. And that is a big focus for Singapore right now, reskilling and upskilling its workforce. And so that's a big part of what we are going to be doing in Singapore. And so from that point in time, I think everything started accelerating. And so, and now, the campus is we are just putting the final touches actually on the bar and the cafeteria. And then we will have, the campus, it will be fully operational as of end of January. And first week of February will be our first course for working professionals on luxury brand management.
Very cool. Josh, give me the brief details then on the campus. I some of the things obviously we could read from the press or from the alumni network, or the informed educational press, whatever it may be. But give me sort of the background. How many students can we or are you aiming to have at one point in time at the campus? What's the better place for a drink, EHL or Singapore? Who's going to have the better rugby team, EHL or Singapore? I'm going to need some of the really important details, and also a topic that I thought about when I spoke to our a friend of the podcast, which Ian Miller clearly is. Any thoughts on the idea of preserving the way things are taught in Singapore as opposed to the campus in Lausanne? Are there going to be staff traveling across? at the beginning to implement some of the courses. Give me some of the background details of how all of that is going to work as well.
Sure. So what we're going to offer in Singapore is there are two main parts to it: the bachelor program and also professional courses for working professionals. So the bachelor program will start with everybody actually starting in Lausanne. So the preparatory year will start in Lausanne, and then they do their internship wherever they want to do it. And then the students who choose the Singapore pathway can come to Singapore from the second year onwards. And the first batch of students, they are actually in Lausanne right now for their preparatory year, and they'll be coming to Singapore in September 2021. We're looking at the first batch of 60 students, and eventually we're going to stabilize at an intake of 100 every September and 60 every February. So about 480 bachelor students enrolled in Singapore at any point in time.
Okay.
On top of that, we also have some of the graduate programs, the master programs. No full-time programs planned for Singapore yet, but some of the on-site modules of our online programs, of our blended programs like the MBA and the EMBA, will be done also in Singapore and of course in Lausanne. So that's another possibility. And then we have, of course, courses for working professionals. We have two which are launched already. First week of February, I mentioned luxury brand management, 1 week long, 5-day course. We have another course in April on hotel and restaurant concept design. And we are pending 3 internal approvals now for courses: one on hospitality finance, one on sustainability, and one on people analytics. So we're going to have more of these in the future in Singapore, focused on working professionals, not just in Singapore, but from all over the world. So that's really the value proposition of the Singapore campus from a program perspective. We are also looking to develop things like GM programs, etc., but that's a bit longer in the pipeline. We will also offer like the junior academy, for example, for high school students to come and experience EHL and hospitality in Singapore from this summer onwards. So look forward to that. We are in the midst of planning that, and we are quite excited to run that too.
Very cool.
So in terms of if I can just speak about the campus. So the campus is actually a beautiful heritage building. It was built in 1903 by a Scottish engineer for his own residence, and actually has seen multiple usages since then. So we're now putting together a historical sort of documentary on that right now. But so after the Scottish engineer built that, it was taken over by British at one point, and they actually hosted the children of the families of British officers who were posted out of Singapore, and then the families were left there. And at one point, the Singapore Police Force had its police mess for its junior officers as well there.
Okay.
The last use before EHL came on board was by AXA, the French insurance company, AXA. They had their corporate university for Asia Pacific at the location. So 1903 heritage building, about 25,000 square feet, beautiful 2 stories, 2 wings, over great beautiful grounds as well. So the heritage building, very, very beautiful. It took vacant for 2 years before we took possession of it. We're renting it. It's owned by the state. And so we had to do quite a bit of work because, water had leaked in. There was some termite damage and all that to the beautiful parquet flooring. So we had to do all that. And then, we are just now getting the bar ready. And then we are ready to invite everybody in for a party post-COVID, because of course you can't do networking events with COVID-19 regulations in place.
Sure. Yeah. So just for the international alumni that might be listening, just to be very clear, are we available, or will it be available to call you? Or I realize you have 1 or 2 better things to do at some point in your day as well, but to call somebody at the campus just to get a quick tour, is that going to be possible, or how is that all going to be working? Because I'm pretty sure that
definitely.
not only alumni from Singapore, but also potentially those that are visiting Asia or specifically Singapore might want to dip in for a quick look around. Is that going to be possible? And what is the price for a cappuccino?
So for now, there is no price for anything because we don't have an F&B license in Singapore, so we can't actually charge for anything. So this is the current situation. So you come in now, and you're going to get a free drink and free coffees. Yeah, so alumni, please come. Let me know. Connect me. Just talk to me via LinkedIn. Happy to accept you. Bring you on campus, show you around. It's not a very big campus compared to Lausanne, of course, but it's a beautiful building. So just come on. I think if I go back to your previous question on actually how is it going to work, right? Relative to Lausanne. So are we going to have our own management? Are we going to have our own faculty? So what happens is that this is part of EHL Group, so we are part of Ecole, so part of the higher education unit of EHL Group. So the managing director of the campus, Jenny Ang, she reports into our chief academic officer, Juan, and therefore she has oversight of everything on campus. There's a dean that will be hired, is being hired right now, who also who report to the managing director. Faculty members, we are hiring 2 or 3 of them to start with, and we'll hire more in the future. So the idea is that we don't actually want fly-in, fly-out professors as much as we can, because the idea is that we want to have faculty who are rooted in Singapore, who form their own networks and really invest their time in Singapore. So we hope that they will stay for at least 2 to 3 years for each mandate. For the short courses, if they come in for executive programs, we then will fly professors in and out at the very beginning. Eventually, we'd like to stop that because firstly, it doesn't make sense with in terms of carbon footprint, and secondly, also cost, it doesn't make sense. So that's really important. We want to transit to building a strong local team. When I say local, I mean based in Singapore. It doesn't need to be Singaporean per se. So that's going to happen. In terms of the content of the programs, the bachelor program actually will be the bachelor program. The content is the same because it's a joint academic board governing academic standards, and same for the examination board. So therefore, what will happen is that the content is the same. The professors will be different, obviously, because one will be in Singapore, one will be in Lausanne. But what will actually be different will be the case studies used in class. We want to use more Asian examples and also languages offered, because we will offer French in Singapore, but we also want to offer Mandarin and Malay and different Asian languages rather than the languages offered now in Lausanne. And also for electives, we'll offer more Asia-focused electives. That's really the main difference. Those are the main differences of the curriculum per se.
Okay, very cool. Tell me this then, Josh. If I look at the next 5, maybe 7, maybe 10 years ahead, what would you hope for in an ideal world? If you could draw the next couple of years, I imagine a fully functioning campus with a continuous inclusion of 17 to 20% of students from the Asian hemisphere. What about beyond that? Are we gonna have a campus in Melbourne soon as well, or are you really at a point now where you're trying to look and enforce this footprint that you have from the base that you've created in Singapore? And also, I can't help but ask, what about yourself? What is your role specifically in that whole EHL Singapore cosmos? I understand that your colleague Jenny, who's going to be taking over the campus, and you, I mean, quite literally, will have to work closely together, because I imagine you're trying to find students for her to educate on her campus, correct?
Yes. So if I would go to your question about what's the plan for growth in Asia, or the plan for growth of EHL Group, our CEO, Michelle Rocha, has been very clear about that, actually, with our strategy. So I think one of the great things for working for EHL, or rather working for an organization which is not for profit, because we are owned by a foundation, the profit doesn't go into anyone's pockets, is that we can actually be very long-term in planning. So now we have a 2025 strategy we're working towards, and they're already planning a 2035 strategy, right? So that's something very, very exciting. So before COVID, the idea for the next campus was actually in Africa. However, now with COVID, this has accelerated our digital transformation plans, as with many companies. And so therefore, the Africa campus is taking a back seat at this point in time. And the digital campus, the virtual campus, which is really a digital layer to everything we do, is actually high on the priority list. So that's really the ambition as overall for the group level, I mean, amongst other things that we are doing. For Singapore, the ambition is that, well, the first 5 years will see us reach capacity of, I think 480 students for bachelor and then other executive programs. And then we want to say, can we grow to 2,000 students or even more? Or can we grow to the same size as Lausanne? And that's really the idea, that then eventually we'll introduce a preparatory year. We have all the restaurants and bars and all that in Singapore as well. And that's really the ambition, or the eventual ambition for the Singapore campus. And not just having courses, but also having the innovation center, for example, the business incubation platform here, and having all the different institutes as well, the research institutes also based in Singapore, having that level of education and that level of innovation here in Singapore as well. So not copying and pasting, but really evolving and innovating from what we have done in Lausanne, and also then pioneering certain initiatives from here in Singapore. So that's really the ambition. Will we open a campus in another part of Asia? Maybe, I don't know. But for now, we have been approached many times to open campuses in parts of China, for example, and other locations as well. But the answer has always been no for now, because we have decided to open a campus in Singapore, and that is the focus for Asia at this point in time.
Sure.
As for what I will be doing, my role stays the same. My team and I, we build the brand of EHL Group in Asia Pacific. So that is beyond the campus. The campus is one business unit. We have EHL Singapore is actually the third campus of the group, right? There's EHL Lausanne, there's the campus in Pasuk in the Swiss German part, and there's also now Singapore. And so we represent the group, and so I will work closely. My team will work closely with the campus team. So the campus team is growing. There's Jenny, I mentioned, the MD. There's an operations director, Damien Delier, who transferred from Lausanne to Singapore to take on that role. So essentially, Jenny's number two. And then they have hired their own project managers, their own executive assistants, and they're building a team now. But my team will still very much focus on the marketing, the events, communications, branding, all of that. We'll still do that. I've committed to stay till the end of the year. I want to see the campus open. I want to see the first batch of students in, and then we'll see. I think the group is evolving. The group is growing. There are many opportunities within the group. If I do need to transit out at one point.
Sure. So, Josh, all of this is, is in the planning. You're sitting there in 2019. The campus is on the horizon. Things are looking good for the EHL Group in Asia Pacific, and bam, COVID-19 comes around. Explain, without wanting to go into too much detail, because obviously we all understand that it's part of our daily lives now, and probably will be for the next couple of months at least, if not next couple of years. So I don't want to get too miserable about the topic, because enough of that is being done in the informed press. But tell me, how challenging just was that for you, and especially somebody like you described yourself earlier as somebody who travels a lot. I imagine your miles and more account was stacked, or probably still is stacked, because where the hell would you fly right now? But explain all of that as well to me, and how, first of all, that's affected the business side of your job, because clearly I would imagine there has been an effect, and secondly also for you, as a person, because I recall from when we last saw each other that the whole idea of traveling it was always very important to your heart, and I imagine that is still the case. You've studied hospitality for a reason, so people and all of that is clearly close to your heart. None of that, I would assume, even though obviously Singapore has done better than most countries with the whole situation, but I assume you haven't really been making a whole lot of new contacts either in the past, let's say 12 months.
Yes, it's so if I go back to end of 2019, right? So end of 2019 was a great year, and 2020 was going to be a phenomenal year for the team. We were pumped. I think with many companies and many industries, right? 2020 was going to be the year that everything would improve and be great. And then of course COVID hit. But what is important to realize is that COVID hit in Asia first. And of course at the very beginning, everybody in other parts of the world saying, well, that's just an Asian thing and it's going to pass like SARS, like other illnesses, and therefore it's just Asia that will be affected. So we were trying to understand the situation. We were trying to communicate to headquarters that this was important and we needed to communicate on that. And of course, eventually COVID-19 went to Europe and went to the US, and everything is as we know today. So I think a big learning for us overall as an organization is that well, we could react well and very fast. So I don't know if you know, but EHL actually transited the bachelor program to a fully virtual sort of implementation within 2 or 3 days. And that was something that, yes, it was rocky, of course. It wasn't the best platform, but nonetheless, we managed to do that because of the digital assets we built with the online MBA that we have. So that, I think that really showed the resilience of the organization. So that was something very, very important to see. I think another great point of the of COVID-19 and in terms of what it showed the organization, what is the organization made of, is that now, because back then the Singapore team and the US team were always a delocalized team, and now suddenly everybody is virtual. Everyone is delocalized because everybody was working from home for a while. I think that also made everybody realize, well, what is it like working from home? And everything became much more cordial and human, if I could say, in terms of communication, which is actually also quite nice. It puts everybody on a level playing field. In terms of business, international education, of course, I think reading the news is impacted. Students, some parents and students are fearing of going abroad because why go abroad? I'd rather just stay at home and maybe just do online classes, or I may even defer my entry to university. So that, of course, has impacted the business. Nonetheless, actually, we have never done as well. So I think as more students sort of search for alternative opportunities rather than going to the US or the UK or Australia, the traditional options, we have also been dealt quite a heavy hand with COVID-19. Switzerland actually and Singapore by extension have dealt relatively well with COVID-19, and so this has also been in our favor in many ways. Of course, people can ask also, well, hospitality and tourism has been decimated by COVID-19. So why are people wanting to study? So students actually are surprisingly positive about it. They say, well, I'm going to come and study now. I'm graduating in 4 years. The industry will turn around and will be even better than stronger than before. Just as 9/11, just as SARS, just as all the previous things in the past. Of course, this COVID-19 has been a bit more drawn out than before, than what we've seen before. But nonetheless, we do believe in the fundamentals of travel, and we do believe that yes, it will be different, but we believe that people will travel for leisure first, and then of course for friends and family next, and then after that also for corporate business travel, which will probably be the last segment to recover. How has that been personally in terms of travel? It's funny because I think it's very important for starting out in any job. I think it's important to be on the ground to understand the market and do all that. After a while, however, that constant travel, especially and only in economy class, it really burns really burns your butt away, right? It really gets quite tiring after a while, if I can be very honest. So I enjoyed it. But I was already in the process of scaling down my travel, to be honest, before COVID hit. So I was already trying to say, well, why do I need to travel, right? I was questioning myself, and the thing is, I realized that if I'm always with a team member, then how can my team member be allowed to make his or her own mistakes in market, right? And that's why I needed to say, if I delegate, I need to fully delegate. I need to step away. I need to then do something else. So therefore, I was trying to find different activity and within my scope, of course. So I would say that looking back now, now it's 2021. Looking back at the year of 2020, I'm actually quite glad that we have reduced travel to this extent because we don't have a choice. But I'm just thinking back to the days where I would go to Sydney. I would take a midnight flight to Sydney, organize and conduct a selection day, interview sessions, and I would be back on the same flight, the next flight out again. Not even spending a night in Sydney, right? And Sydney is it's not 2 hours away, right? It's about 6 hours away from Singapore. Yeah. So to think that we traveled that way before in the past, insane, totally insane. Do I want to go back to that if it's possible? Definitely not. I want more sustainable travel. I want to spend 2 weeks to a month in a place to really build those relationships. I think that's important. I think COVID-19 has also shown the strength of human relationships. All the time spent traveling, and that's why I say it's important. All the time spent traveling and building those relationships, we are now reaping the rewards of those, because now we can pick up the phone and say, hey, I can't see you this year, but can we do this together? And that's where we have seen people respond amazingly well. We also do our own webinar sort of series, and we have been doing them once every 2 weeks. We have seen great people there. From CEOs of companies to entrepreneurs, and people have responded really, really well to being virtual. And I think, yes, China has in the later part of 2020, China came back online and business has been back to usual. So my colleagues in China were traveling again. And now, of course, there's another wave happening in China, so that travel has been curtailed again. So everything's virtual again. So I think virtual will be the base of everything. And then on-site activities or live activities will be the activation, or really be the plus point if we can do it. But it's not something that will be a must anymore.
Just like that, Josh, 45 minutes have passed, so I'm not going to keep you for all that much longer. But I have two more questions that I need to ask. Otherwise, I will be shouted at home. Tell me that there must be a WTF experience, a what the fuck experience, at some point in the last couple of years, somewhere between setting up the new campus, setting up the office. Where you just thought this cannot be for real right now, where you had to, I don't know, repeat a process 6 or 7 times, something along those lines. Do you have any moment at all that you can think of where you thought, what the hell?
Okay, yeah, so yes, definitely there have been moments like that. I think one that really comes to mind is, I remember I was actually back in Europe. I was in Amsterdam, I believe. I was at a Citizen M property somewhere in the world. I can't remember where. And I was watching reports on the hurricanes or typhoons happening in the Philippines. And then why that really impacted me was because I had sent Daniel Exotin, who was back then still a student assistant with us, to travel for us to the Philippines in Cebu. And of course, I saw the hurricanes and the damage and the destruction that it was causing all the different islands of Philippines. And I said, I really hope it's not there. And of course, he was not reachable by phone, right? And he just wasn't picking up, or rather, there was no signal at all. So I was thinking to myself, I just sent somebody to his death. and that's when of course the next day he called me saying, hey Josh, all is fine. I'm holed up at an EHL alumni hotel, and the original hotel I was at has been destroyed totally. So thankfully I moved to this one. I'll tell you the story another day. So that was, I think, one moment where I really thought this is not happening to me, or not happening to us, I guess, in that way. I think there are other occasions. I think once I came to the office at 7 a.m. in the morning at Club Street, and I like to go in early. And I got in, and there was this lady, and we were on level 3. So I walked up the steps, and there was this lady sleeping in front of the door of the office. And I was like, why? What are you doing here, right? And I realized that actually crazy night out. I had no idea who she was, and she had no idea where she was and what she was doing, and she had no phone, nothing. And so we spent the next 3 hours trying to find out where her belongings were and what actually happened the night before. So I'm not going to go into details. I'm definitely not going to say who it was, but it was quite an experience. Yeah.
So the EHL nights also happen in Singapore, from what I hear.
That person wasn't EHL, but the EHL nights have not happened. Actually, they do happen, but with different groups of people. So they are the spirit is strong in Singapore, very strong.
Yeah, sounds good. Josh, the last question before we part away or go the ways here. Explain to me, if you were to reflect your own career path and from 2011 to today, give me 2 or 3 sentences of how it went. The one thing I would like to ask is there 1 or 2 people who you think were particularly influential in your career? Someone maybe from within the EHL group or somebody from beyond, maybe not from your private life, but from your professional life.
I think if I would just sum up the past, say, 10 years with EHL, working for EHL, be it part-time as a student or full-time as staff, I think I've just been very grateful for the support and trust of the organization. It's been a lot of fun. It's just sheer madness because we've grown so much in the past years. Yeah. But at the same time, it's just about big picture, about growth, about being driven. I think a lot of it is internal. I guess I'm very thankful for the team I've had. I would say if I was have to choose a few people actually that have really shaped the past few years, I would say one of them would be my current boss, Olivier Roux, who has really been behind a lot of the growth that we have been doing. I think another person, a few other people, of course, would be, I would say one person actually is not so apparent, but actually is this lady called Alice Gan. And she's not related to me, but she was the student assistant as well. And she actually launched our Chinese WeChat platform in July 1st, 2015. And she didn't work for EHL after graduation. She's working with Hilton right now, doing very well. But she shaped our initial China strategy, and something that is very, very important to us today. I would say another person that I've met along the way, who has impacted me a lot. I have a lot of mentors, but one of them is Ivan Dici. So he's the GM of the Ritz-Carlton Shenzhen, and also multi-property GM of Ritz-Carlton for many years. And he is the true representation of Ritz-Carlton. And he is somebody who has been very, very honest with me from the beginning and has been very, very helpful with advice and also telling me to stay on path. Pierre Perrosset, of course, at Ritz-Carlton Hong Kong. A lot of these people, alumni, most of them, who have kept me on the path and really influenced me along the way, and really, really great people. Yeah.
Josh, I cannot thank you enough for your time. It's a breath of fresh air to speak to you and to hear of you. So well done. I have one little story that I wanted to share with you at the end. I'm sure you recall or are aware who André Vici was or is. He's still around, obviously. Yeah. So this was maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago or something. Mr. Vici came to join us for an alumni event here in Berlin, and he talked very fondly about the new campus. And at some point, as Stammvater here in Berlin, I had a chat with him at the end of the night, and he said, he's traveling to Singapore at the end of the week. And I said, well, if you go to Singapore, I'm sure you must know my good old friend Josh Gan. And he goes, yeah, of course. And I promise you, Josh, for the next 10 minutes, he spoke very highly of you, the effect you've had on EHL and all of that. So well done on behalf of probably everyone in the EHL group on what you've achieved. Thanks for your time, for joining us here on Smack. It's like I said, it's really been a breath of fresh air. And I will hold you up, maybe not on all 120 different gin varieties, but on at least 1 or 2 of them as I make it to Singapore, hopefully whenever COVID has passed.
Perfect. Thank you, Fritz. Thank you so much for having me on this episode. Really appreciate it.
Josh. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Special thanks to our season sponsor, I Reckon You, hospitality's first customer data platform. Their philosophy is to stop buying software and building a framework. Their middleware platform connects a hotel's above property and on-premise systems, creating a frictionless flow of hotel and guest data that enhances the guest journey while increasing operational efficiency. Find out more at ireckonyou.com, and don't forget to check out what there is to know about Smack at smack.media or on our YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook channel. We'll see you next time.